In this week's video, I'm covering 5 distinct mistakes that every single beginner makes. I'll then cover how I fix them and show you the ways how I look at certain processes in order to make them easier or make sense in my mind. When you're learning to throw on the wheel, there's always going to be a number of problems you'll run into. For some people, they may end up being hurdles you'll get stuck on. As often, at the start, the hardest thing is actually recognizing why the mistakes that are occurring are happening. In a physical setting, such as in a pottery class, your teachers should be able to quickly identify these and help you fix them. But in a world where more and more people are learning this craft with the help of the internet and videos like this, in perhaps a more insular way, I think these really common mistakes can end up persisting, as often you're trying to do all the problem solving yourself as you're learning. So, in this week's video, I want to cover what I think are 5 really common mistakes that beginners make. These are ubiquitous issues. Every single person learning to throw on the wheel will encounter them. But there are also issues that you will probably naturally iron out with practice. Yet, what makes learning any skill or craft faster is when somebody can point those out for you. The first quick tip, which is completely unrelated to this video, but if I find a really hard bag of clay, I just pour water into it, tie it back up, and then store it on its side for a day or two, and thereafter it can be wedged up and used properly. I think I'm running into this problem at the moment, as all this hot weather we've had recently has thoroughly dried out lots of my clay, which is making me rethink how I store it all. Anyway, I've weighed out a bunch of 2-pound lumps of clay, which is about 900 grams. I think this is a good amount of clay to demonstrate with, but if you're practicing, I think it's a touch too much material. And if you are practicing, lumps of about 400 to 500 grams work really well, as they amount to a good handful of clay. And to help keep these lumps of clay nice and soft, I spray them with water and wrap them with plastic. But if I'm throwing many more pots, I'll often store these weighed out, wedged pieces of clay in a plastic bucket with a lid, as the last thing you want to do is leave these out exposed, as they'll develop a harder outer skin, which will make centering them far more difficult. Now, the first mistake is poor clay distribution. This often leads to pots collapsing prematurely, especially when you start scaling up and using more material, simply because the pots begin to have more weight to them. And by the way, I won't be covering the centering process in this video, but if you would like to watch a far more thorough tutorial about that, I'll leave a link to a video that specifically covers that topic on screen now and in the description below. Now, you can of course distribute the clay improperly at any stage during the throwing process, but I think generally where it becomes most apparent is in the first 2 or 3 pulls. Often it's because you're squeezing too hard initially when you initiate the lift, and then you let go of that pressure as you reach the upper portions of the walls. This essentially leaves you with a form that's top heavy, and as beginners tend to work slower and use more water, the clay of the vessel itself will become saturated and it will weaken faster. A cross-section of that will look something like this, and the danger is if you keep lifting up, this thinner wall underneath the thicker section will become weaker and narrower, and suddenly all that weight above can cause this thin patch to buckle and collapse. I think obviously when you're first learning to throw, you aren't really thinking about the thickness of the walls you're pulling, but in reality, it's something that most seasoned throwers will be thinking about the entire time. This normally occurs as either you're pinching too hard initially at the very bottom, or as you're lifting up, you're relinquishing pressure too early, which essentially means you're not completing the pulls. And if the pot doesn't buckle, often this is what happens. It'll tear off in your hands, as eventually this thin spot becomes so weak that it can no longer support itself. And then as it's spinning, it will just buckle and collapse like so. Practically speaking, this is much harder to identify when you're actually throwing the pot, as obviously you can't see the cross-section, nor can you see inside the vessel quite so easily. But often you can start to see it when the wall begins to ripple, like this. But the easiest way to identify it is to simply really try and feel the cross-section of the vessel. If the lower portion of the walls feel wafer thin, and there's a ton of thickness towards the top, then the chances are you're going to run into a problem like this. Now, sometimes this is salvageable if the walls underneath are thick enough, but in most cases I'd say it's better to just scrap the clay and start again, rather than trying to fix it like this by pressing in with a kidney on the outside, as it's a bit like trying to rescue a sinking ship. Of course, this is a spectrum of sorts, as there are instances where you can save it, and then as you get further on that spectrum, there's a side where it's just not worth it, or it's impossible. Yet, running into this specific issue is a really good way of learning the clay's material limits. It's better to squeeze too hard and ruin a pot, rather than being too timid and not moving the clay. And in fact, one good thing you can do to practice is just throw cylinders as tall as you can until they buckle and break. Now, in order to correct this, when I'm pulling up the walls, I make a real effort to pull up all the way to the rim and then very gently let go to either side. Throwing on the wheel and making pottery is all about being consistent, and that means your pulls have to be consistent too. At the same time, when you're pulling up a cylinder, you shouldn't try and move all the clay in one pull, as this requires pulling very aggressively and lifting up a lot of material at once, which inevitably imparts an imbalance into the cylinder as you're lifting up so much material with the lower portions suddenly becoming very thin. Thus, it really is helpful to pull in stages, as it means you're gradually thinning out the walls, which means the piece will have a better chance supporting itself. Then, as you begin to become more proficient and understanding of the limits of the specific clay you're working with, you can begin to pull more and more aggressively, whilst maintaining control. And eventually your aim should be to be able to pull cylinders like this, that are even from top to bottom and don't have any inconsistencies in them. Yet it's also worth knowing that this isn't something that will happen overnight. But knowing how to make a cylinder like this is one of the core tenets to throwing on the wheel, as so many pots are built from simple shapes like this. The next mistake I see a lot is related to this, and that's hesitating and being inconsistent when pulling up the walls. Like I mentioned previously, every single step when throwing on the wheel is built from being consistent. As if you suddenly impart jerky motions into the clay, or suddenly speed up or slow down your hands as they're lifting up the walls, or you suddenly change the wheel speed, then you're going to create inconsistencies in the vessel. But back when I used to teach evening classes, one of the main things I'd see when people were first learning how to pull was a sort of indecision when lifting up the wall. The rate at which they moved their hands up would be very slow and then very rapid, or they'd linger in one spot for far too long, or they'd alter their pressure a couple of times as they were moving their hands up, squeezing really hard and then relinquishing that pressure. And essentially, all of this indecision and being hesitant results in the walls of the pot reflecting these movements. Now, this tends to compound and become much worse when you slow down too much or linger in one spot for too long. As typically, if you are a beginner, when you slow down, you may still continue pinching the clay, and thus you just create a thin spot in the walls. This links back to the first tip, as by being inconsistent with your lift, you're essentially, again, just distributing the clay poorly. And you can actually identify this in the patterns on the surface of the clay that's left. The throwing rings. For instance, these rings look evenly spaced, but if you compare that to how the wall looked previously, you can very clearly see just how inconsistent these walls look in comparison. There are more significant throwing rings and more subtle ones, deeper gouges, and some flat regions, all of which implies that the pulls themselves were erratic and uncertain. And thus, when I lift, I really want to chase consistency. And from the moment I initiate the pull at the bottom, to when I reach the rim, the rate at which my hands are moving up and the wheel speed should stay consistent. The result being evenly spaced throwing rings like this. Thus, when you're learning, I think it's worth taking the time to look at the surfaces left over on the outsides of your pots as you're making. They can tell you a lot, as in these walls are left an imprint of your hands, which are your tools, essentially. And these marks themselves, the throwing rings, can provide you with a trove of information if you know how to look at them properly. It's a simple rule to follow, really, but once a pull of the walls has been initiated, you shouldn't stop or slow down until you reach the top. Now, of course there are exceptions, but those aren't really worth getting into at this moment, as they tend to be more applicable for particular shapes, or for cylinders that are particularly tall, rather than what I'm talking about here, which is just the fundamental process itself. The next very common mistake is all about the bases of your pots, both making them too thin, how to check their thickness, but I think there's also another thing to discuss, which is how to properly observe if they're too thick or too thin without having to check them yourself with something like a needle tool pressed through the clay. Now, the way I sort of train my way to do it is to sort of use the wheel as a reference point versus the clay itself. There is, of course, an obvious height difference between the two, but this becomes harder to distinguish as you create the hollow itself and open up the base, as mainly there's that wall of clay in between, which makes it harder to compare the height difference between the floor of the pot and the metal of the wheel head on the outside. So what I used to do is place a finger on the inside and the outside like so, and I'd look in the mirror in front of me, which gives me this precise view. And then when I lower my fingers down gradually, as both digits come to rest on the respective lowest points, I can see that there's a clear difference in height between the two fingers, with the finger on the inside being higher than that on the outside. Initially, I would try and look for a height difference of about a centimetre, as that's a big enough difference to be able to visualise quite easily, and then with time I pushed this further and further, until I could consistently eyeball about 4 or 5 millimetres. Essentially all I'm doing is comparing the outside height with the inside height, and after years of practice doing this, it becomes something you can truly eyeball, instead of having to rely on using your fingers like this, or pressing a needle through the base in order to check its depth. Yet of course, jamming a needle through to the metal is still a really good way of checking the thickness in the bottom. You simply push it through all the way, and then rest a finger on the floor of the pot, grip the needle and then pull them out together, and the length left exposed on the bottom is the thickness of the base of your pot. Now, often what beginners will do is they'll form a base that's thick enough, but then as they open the pot out, they'll make it deeper, thinning the floor of the pot too much and potentially creating a hole in it. In actuality, once that depth is set, the base of the pot is sacrosanct, and when I widen the form like this, I'm dragging my fingertips across that set depth, as in I'm being extremely careful not to press down any further, as what's the point in spending all that time making sure it's the right thickness if I only then ruin it when I open the form up. And it's not just the opening up where this occurs. Often when instigating that first lift, beginners will press those inside fingers downward into the base as they begin that first pull. It's not intentional, of course, it's almost a subconscious act, but if you press in and create a groove in the floor of the pot, you create another inconsistency that you might have to deal with at the trimming stage, or it'll mean the pots you're making will simply have an irregular groove in the bottoms of them. Either way, if you check with a needle, you can very easily just run your fingers or a sponge over this surface to get rid of the tiny hole that's created. Now, the other issue that often occurs is the base is made too thin, especially in the very centre where the lump of clay was initially opened up. If you find this happens and you can see the wheel head through the piece of clay, the best thing to do is to scrape away as much of the slip as you can and then drop in a very soft ball of clay and gradually press it down into place as you turn the wheel. If there's still lots of slip or water inside, you'll find that the lump of clay won't stick down very easily. And then, once it's spread wide enough, I can begin to throw it and spread it out to create an even, flat base once again. Now, this of course gets more difficult to do the taller the walls of your pot are, so the earlier you can spot this and fix it, the better. Otherwise it's something you have to try and do with tools later on. The next mistake is sort of the opposite of being too hesitant, and that's pulling up the walls too quickly. This might not sound like it's much of a problem, but it often comes with a distinct lack of control too. Yes, you may initially move quite a lot of clay upward, but once these sort of intense throwing rings have been created, achieving any more height from this cylinder can be incredibly difficult. Because as you lift from this point on, the amount of clay you're having to handle between your fingers is constantly changing, which just makes it nigh impossible to be consistent. And often this is what I see, somebody running their fingers up the pot numerous times very rapidly, almost as if they expect it to move upwards, when in fact all they're really doing is distorting the walls and creating a very irregular form. The thing is, if this is an aesthetic you're going for, it should almost be the final movement you put into the vessel. But if you pull up too rapidly and impart strong throwing rings like this too early, you're essentially creating a shape that will be devilishly difficult to continue throwing, as you would essentially have to either compress the walls back down into a more even shape, or you'd have to thin out all those thick patches until the wall is nice and even again. Either way, it creates a ton of work if it's not what you're going for, and you can see just how bad it is if you cut the piece in half. Additionally, if these spirals are too dramatic, you're essentially, again, going back to the first problem I was speaking about, which is that the clay that makes up the walls of your pot will be distributed poorly, and thus they'll be much harder to throw and shape from this point on. Instead, when you lift up the clay, you want the throwing rings to be really knitted together, so they almost create a flat surface, which often means moving your hands up the walls more slowly than you'd think. Things tend to go awry in pottery when you rush them, especially when you're lifting up the clay in the walls. The final mistake I see a lot, and it's one I talk about a lot too, is throwing the rim to be too thin to begin with. I think for lots of beginners, the idea of your pots being thin and light towards the top is quite attractive, but I think generally it's done improperly, or with very little care. Again, this links back to clay distribution, just the other way around, I suppose. Now, what often happens when beginners are lifting up is that they'll pinch towards the bottom, and then as they lift the clay up, they'll continue pinching and they'll press through the rim, creating a very thin edge. Like so. Now, the problem is, if you keep doing this and exacerbating it, especially during the stages where you're still just essentially trying to gain height, is that you progressively make a form that's both weaker and won't have enough material in it to perhaps be thrown into the shape you're aiming to make. In this instance, I want to make a bowl, but as the rim is so thin already, as I continue stretching this out, the clay here will only become thinner and thinner as the circumference expands. And as this clay is stretched and opened out, two things will happen. The first is that this thin lip of clay will most likely split at some point, but also, as the clay underneath this and the edge itself are so fine, the entire vessel will simply have less strength, and it won't hold its shape very well. And eventually, something like this will happen, at which point there's really very little you can do to save it. All of this stems from pulling up the walls of the pot incorrectly. And if not corrected, you'll keep making pots like this, with rims that are so thin that they won't be functional, as they'll chip or they'll be damaged with ease. But as they're so fine, you'll also have a very difficult time trimming pots with rims like this, as that paper-thin clay just won't be able to support itself. In terms of cross-section, it'll look a little something like this. The entire wall will taper in, coming to a very fine point, when in actuality a shape like this is better. It has a more consistent wall from bottom to top, and then the rim itself tapers into a finer edge. From the outside, when you view an entire pot thrown like this, it'll give the impression that the entire pot is quite thin and light. But of course the walls themselves below are still strong. But if the entirety of the wall has this sort of needle-like cross-section, then in many ways you're actually just making the throwing process more difficult for yourself. I'm not saying you can't make thin, fine pots, but it's generally a quality that's better to achieve at the leather hard stage when you're trimming the pot. The way to get around this is to always leave some thickness in the rims of your pots. You never want to throw through them. Instead, you want to release your hands just before you get to the top, so it's the same thickness as the walls underneath it, essentially. This will add a lot of stability to the form, but it also means you can shape the pot to your liking without worrying about the rim becoming too thin and splitting. Ultimately, the thinness of the rim should be something you do at the very end of the throwing process. For instance, with these bowls, I keep the rim thick until the piece is at the desired width I want it. And it's at this point, as there's also some thickness in the rim, that I can throw the desired shape I'm after, too. I haven't suddenly run out of material, and the clay here is thick enough to hold its shape, which ultimately means I can be far more intentional with my throwing, which means I can actually make the shapes I want to, rather than every lump of clay thrown sort of turning into an arbitrary shape, as you haven't really thought about where you need the clay to be in order to get to that end goal. Proper and accurate clay distribution is everything when you're throwing, and it's what I think really makes the difference between throwing aimlessly and sort of just being happy with the arbitrary results you achieve, as compared to being more purposeful and throwing with an aim in mind. It is entirely natural though to go through those early stages, as of course you're still learning all the intricate steps that go into throwing a pot, but at some point you have to begin pushing through that and to start thinking about why you do certain things instead of just letting them happen. And rest assured, these were all things that I encountered when I first started learning how to throw. It's entirely natural to feel a bit lost or confused when you first take up this craft, but hopefully the tips and tricks in this video helped to dispel some of those and make parts of the process make more sense. Thanks for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the end. And, as always, I'll see you next time.